Hey there, welcome to the guides. I'm Tim. I've been making guides for a little while now. Like a year ago, I've decided to start archiving them, and this is my second build of the league. I started with the Dominating Blow guide that I did before, and now I'm at the Herald of Thunder Autobomber combined with a Zoomancer. Um, Last league, I was like, I'd really like to play like an Elementalist Bomber. Um, some Herald of Thunder shenanigans, some Spectre shenanigans on top, and with the changes they did, especially with Elementalist, you're able to do some wild shenanigans playing Autobomber now. Um, this build has stacked like endless mechanics to make it viable because usually the problems are that they're squishy, that they do to bossing damage, especially because you usually can't use auras because of Lone Messenger. Um, what I've done is I've decided to go for minions that apply auras to me, and therefore I end up being tanky anyways. Like I get Grace and Determination of Spectres. I'll be going into more in depth later, and other auras as well. Plus, we can use cool new rune graphs like this because we don't use auras ourselves. And because I'm mostly going for a one link, and with the Herald of Thunder, I also got lots of mana to reserve. Yeah, this is a really cool and smooth build that I did. I'm pretty proud of it. I've been very nervous making this build because there are like so many mechanics stacked in. It's pretty impossible for me to explain it all. I hope you just go into the PoE, you just look at some clips, look at my end explanations at the end of the video, and yeah, maybe check out the forum guide. I'll be doing one. And because I noticed that, after the build is posted, there are like lots of little things that come to mind that I'm updating. Yeah, if you try out the build, be careful. Like, it's very in depth, it's very intense, lots of mechanics, but at the end of the day, the build is very, very fun. And I think honestly pretty easy to put together. Um, though it is definitely a little pricey. I'll put the price in the description. Anyways, leave a comment if you like it. If you didn't like it, just leave some feedback. It keeps me making these videos. I hope you have fun with the guide now. See you around. Where were we? We go back in. Alright, so Herald of Thunder doesn't just start attacking stuff on its own. So what do we have to do? We have to activate Herald of Thunder. We do it by shocking something ourselves. I use Shock Nova for this, so I shock once, Herald of Thunder starts activating. Every single time Herald of Thunder activates, Storm's Secret activates, so that means we start taking a little bit of damage, which is then reduced by Lightning Res. And that way our cast when damage taken starts triggering, and Crackling Lance spreads out. When Crackling Lance spreads out, it shocks everything, because it's such a huge area. It shocks like 2 whole screens. Since we're using Shape of Storms, it's guaranteed to shock, so 2 whole screens are shocked, and that means we need to kill 1 enemy, and Impulsor will explode the screen. Impulsor damage explosions is scaled by global damage and increased area, and we've got both. Since we're scaling lots of global damage with Herald of Thunder, and we're using Heart of Destruction, we got 60 area while mapping. So let me show you how this works. I'll just run to the boss real quick. So we've activated the chain, and now it's attacking on its own, you see? So we pretty much don't have to do anything anymore. As long as more than 6 seconds haven't gone past, Herald of Thunder will just keep attacking on its own. So you see, you kill, and that's the fun part about it. If you kill one, you're pretty much the whole screen is dead. It's just very chill. Okay, let me run back. Yeah, and that's the map cleared. Just very chill.
Yes. Schenk den reinen Weißwein ein. 1 und 1 ergibt 2, nur wenn ich bei dir bleib. Zähne zusammenbeißen, Beine breit. In der Sonne kreidebleich, Late Night, Eitelkeit, Heisigkeit, der leidende Geist, da reicht ein Jein vielleicht. Keiner weiß, so weit das Auge reicht, blinded by the lights, der Kleingeist, der scheint in das Best, der sitzt best im eigenen Nest eingenässt, kratzender Kreiderest, reif fürs Bett, bevor die ersten Funken sprühen, wie ungestüm, nichts im Schrank, das Spiegelbild dein Ungetüm, nur ein Grund genügt, nie mehr unterkühlt, die Tundra blüht, Zunge glüht, ey, siehen keine Augen, kleines, ja, ein graues Haar, fast wie ausgeweidet. Viele suchen die Liebe, aber brauchen keine. Nur eine Pause auf der Augenweide, grauer Star. Trete ein in meinen brennenden ein. Hier fühle ich mich heimisch in meinem sengenden Heim. Home sweet home. Home sweet home. Trete morgens, mittags, abends, Frühstück in der Finsternis. Blicke hinter dich, dein Gesicht ist nur hinderlich. Was nicht gefunden werden kann, finde ich innerlich. Ob dieses Leben Sinn ergibt, lieber nicht. Ey, hier sind wir schon gewesen, die Gunst der Stunde verlebt. Wunde Punkte genesen, rundherum und zufrieden, ey. Kein Grund sich zu verlieben, das Leben ist nur schön, wenn wir verlieren. Ich bin nur keiner von vielen, treibe dich auf die einsame Spitze. Das Hungertuch steht dir gut, ey. Zähne klappern vor Hitze hier, Zähne klappern vor Hitze hier. Trete ein in meinen brennenden Hain, hier fühle ich mich heimisch in meinem sengenden Heim. Home sweet home, home sweet home. Trete ein in meinen brennenden Hain, hier fühle ich mich heimisch in meinem sengenden Heim. Home sweet home, home sweet home.
Interested in running the build yourself, so let's get into a little bit more in depth about how the damage scaling on this build works out. I've made two versions on PoE, so one version is a 16 million damage version and another is a 30 million damage version. Pretty much the lower budget one is around 20 to 35 divines and the higher budget one is around, I would say, 80 to 100 divines. So this is not a starter build for sure. You need key items to make this build work. I'll showcase it on the higher budget version. So let's start. How do we scale the damage? First off, usually people take on Herald of Thunder, they take the triple damage Annihilating Light, so triple damage with elemental skills. The problem with the huge downside of having reduced elemental resistances, and since the build is forced to use 2 Storm Secrets, you effectively end up having like no slots to get any tankiness and stuff. Since I wanted to avoid that, I figured what else is happening. I instead went for a Crest of Desire. So we slot in the Herald of Thunder in here, and the Herald of Thunder gets like +8 to socketed gems, and then it gets quality and it deals double damage. This effectively is the same like a 6-link, I tested it out. And since we get a open slot on a weapon instead of Annihilating Light, we end up actually being able to scale it higher than with Annihilating Light. It's interesting. Since the changes to Herald of Thunder, they changed it so that quality has increased hit frequency, which is like a more multiplier for Herald of Thunder. So what I decided to do was to simply scale up the quality. As you can see, it's 95% increased frequency. So the helmet gives it quite a lot quality, up to 50%, and then Ashes of the Stars gives it another 30%. So we end up, that's like the base damage scaling that we scale it around. Of course, then we're also scaling up the gem levels. As you can see, this is level 21 plus 13. It's because we're also using the Dark Seer for global plus 2 to all skill gems, which is also very, very useful. We're actually not using a caster shield. I instead went for full tank shield. Probably you could get like 10% more damage, but I prefer being tanky. Well, Dark Seer is actually stronger than one might think, because it enables us to get Malediction. The enemies take 10% increased damage and deal 10% less damage, and on top we're getting additional life and additional energy shield. So it's just like a all-rounder, like a very nice version of a Scepter, honestly. Since, you know what's funny, there's no better option than Dark Seer on a on a Scepter, because Herald of Thunder is not an attack, it's not a spell, so it only scales of global damage modifiers. So that means plus 2 gem levels and all that, all those sort of shenanigans, but the suffixes on any type will not really help it if you're not going crit. And I'm not going crit on Herald of on my particular version. As you can see, it has a like 7% chance to crit, and that's it. I decided to not go crit and use different damage scaling vectors instead. We also, of course, are using Elementalist, which grants us Convergence, so the 30% more elemental damage. Then Elemental Overload for 40% more damage. And then we're using Lone Messenger for 100% increased, 100% more damage. So you see, we're stacking quite a lot of more damage multipliers. On top of this, we're running Aspect of the Spider for on the gloves for 20% increased damage taken on enemies. And on top of this, we're running 101% increased effect of shock. How this works is, after the updates of the... let me show you. It's actually very interesting tech. So they updated the Shape of Storms notable. Shocks from your hits always increase damage taken by at least 25%. And you know what that means? It's not... your shocks are not dependent on damage anymore. It's 100% flat. So think about it like this. If you have 25% shock on this, and you have 100% increased effect of shock, so it would simply be... so let's say we got 25 shock of this notable, and we have 100% increased effect of lightning ailments. Then we would simply make it times 2, and we would have 50 shock effect. So you see where I'm going with this. If we get like 300% increased shock, 200% increased shock effect, it's times 3. So we suddenly get a 75% deterministic shock with, even if you're only doing 1 damage. It doesn't matter how much damage you do. It's insanely strong. And if you combine this with the maximum effect of shock notable, and you get yourself a couple of clusters with lightning ailments and getting lightning ailments on both large clusters, what you end up with is a guaranteed, as you can check out the videos, 101 shock. It's insane. So that's 100% 1 increased damage taken. And you can combine this with Shock Nova. So Shock Nova grants you at 23% quality, 21% maximum effect of shock. That means we get 50 base, plus 15, plus 21%. So our max shock with Shock Nova would be 50 base, plus 15 of mastery, plus 21% of the gem. But since we're using Ashes of the Stars, the quality goes up and the maximum effect of shock goes up as well. So now it's 36% to maximum effect of shock, because it scales of quality. So instead of 68, we get 50 plus 15 of the mastery plus 36% of quality. So our deterministic shock is 101. You can do this on any build, in any skill, with 0 damage and simply shock effect scaling. It's a very, very strong vector of scaling. Okay, so this is how we reach 101 shock. On top of this, we're using classic Doryanis, as many builds use, with minus 200% lightning. So that's another 200% increased damage taken. I'm using on... no, I'll get into this later, what else I have on him. The other vector of scaling that I'm using is Spiritual Aid, increases and reductions to minion damage also affect you. So we get lots of increased minion damage on the tree. We also get it off the Elegant Hubris, another 160%, so that's another vector of scaling and makes nodes like these way more effective. I've used this in my other Ignite build as well. On top of this, we're using golems. So the flame golems gives us increased damage, which scales up to roughly 90% increased damage. The Spectres grant us additional damage. You see where I'm going with this. There are lots of different vectors. This video would be 40 minutes long if I keep going, so what I'll do at this point, I will make a forum guide and you can look into there if you're still interested. I will go into the defensive and I'll go into the defensive scaling as well. So we're running 5k hit pool. It's roughly like, I think, while mapping. So at 69%, then we get Enduring Composures, so we also get like Endurance charges. And the flasks are usually always up, so if we hit both, that would be 87%. I'm not really scaling up the Elemental Rest a lot though, because we have so much uptime on the Immortal Call with all the self-damaging going on. We're using a really cool tech with Golem of Safeguarding. So Golem of Safeguarding is here, and it's actually level 28. Because I'm using a 1-link Herald of Thunder, I'm able to 6-link the chest, and what I decided to do is simply to go Spectres, AG, and Golems in it. So you see the Animate Guardians level 29, the Ray Spectres level 29, and this is level 28. That means they're pretty much immortal, they don't really die unless you go... honestly, like every 100 maps, maybe. So, interestingly enough, this scales upwards. So, what ends up happening is your golem takes 49% of melee damage you take. So, you pretty much from melee damages that manage to hit you, 49% will be negated because it's pretty much always alive. So, that's like 50% less damage taken, which is insane. So, the new Elementalist Liege of the Primordial is very, very, very strong. I had a call while I was doing the first part of the explanation. So to finish this off, I listened to it and I figured what would be like the key points that are still... don't need to tell you every single detail, but like I would probably say 3 more things and then the build is pretty much explained. So defensive wise especially. This build is so tanky because it combines evade with block and a high recovery of Leech with the Herald of Thunder and the Mastery when you use a Flask. So it ends up having a high hit pool, being very rarely hit, and then you just sustain it instantly. Then with high Immortal Call uptime and Enduring Composure, it's strong. Combine this with the fact that the minions are taunting bosses and stuff all the time. That means you hardly ever get attacked. It just ends up with you hardly ever getting attacked. And if you do get hit, you're usually able to tank it. The only thing this build dies to, I also made a clip, is like giga big hits of bosses. It can die to that, for sure. That's like the only vector that can kill it. You don't really die while mapping to normal mobs. Last things I'll get into is the Spectres, the Mercenary, and the Animate Guardian. So what Spectres I'm using? I actually adjusted just now, it's not 30 million, it's 27.5 million, but it's fine. I had an old option still clicked that isn't quite true, and I want this to represent a true number. So the first spectre we're using is the Perfect Guardian Turtle, which grants us Determination, a high Determination aura because it's so high level. It's like a 50% more aura. Very, very strong. Then we're using the Thunderbird for a very nice 31% more evasion aura. Speaks for itself. Then we're using Perfect Spirit of Fortune, and what this does, it's this the totem thing. It grants us your lightning damage is lucky, and it also grants us the Wrath aura. Wrath doesn't actually do anything to us, because as I've said, we're not a spell. But it enables us to get the Watcher's Eye mods, Penetrate Lightning, and increase lightning damage while affected by Wrath. And also, lightning damage is lucky, so this means even if mercenaries get removed, we don't actually need the amulet. And since we don't need that particular amulet with Perkle's Toe, we can actually put another negative lightning res on the mercenary and cheaply get the minus 200 lightning on him. And for example, also get like, let's get that into a second. So that's the third Spectre, and the fourth Spectre we're using is the Blasphemer, the Perfect Blasphemer. So what this guy does is something insane. It grants us, number one, an enfeeble aura that is very, very strong. It's probably like level 30 and stuff. It only hits very occasionally though. And the other thing it grants us with half uptime is a smite aura that is insane. In case you don't know, it's 37 to 700 right now, and this scales up with Spectre levels. And this is the equivalent to like a level 50 smite. So whenever he hits this, we get like, I don't know, like a 30%, 40%, like probably 30% damage increase. It's insane, honestly. It's not calculated in PoE, so, well, actually, it is. Okay, so it calculates it so the Blasphemer is on. It's like a 50% uptime. It's insane, and it's very strong, and it's one of the reasons why scaling Spectres is so strong. Okay, so much for the Spectres. As I've said, the Spectres are very tanky, and they shouldn't really die. Okay, because we're using minion life, meat shield, and empower. Okay, and on top of this, we're using automation. So I talked about this in my other guide. If you use automation and you combine it with convocation, convocation ends up having like a 1.8 second cooldown, and because of this, you're pretty much resetting the aggro on the minions constantly. So it doesn't activate in hideouts, but as you've seen in the other clips, they just spawn to you 24/7, so they never get focused down, you know, never get whittled down. And since I'm using a rational doctrine with perfectly aligned strength and intelligence, I get both profane ground and consecrated ground. And since it lingers, every single time that they port to me, they get a stack of consecrated ground on them, so 5% regen. And since I have this one, it's like a 6% regen on them, which is really, really nice to keep them alive. You see they have the consecrated ground effect on them. And they also get the convocate regen, which is 2%. So overall, they're permanently regening like 8% of the HP, which is enough if you have as much life as I'm scaling. We also get 1% more regen on here. Okay, let's get into the Animate Guardian gear. The AG gear, the AG is wearing a good old Kingmaker, explains for itself. If you're not using Kingmaker, you can use the stuff that grants you additional curse effect on enemies. You know which one, I mean, you can find it. I got it in a low budget version. We're using good old Learcast, Garb, Hands of Heresy, which you probably don't know about, excommunicate enemies on melee hit, which makes them unable to do any chaos damage, which is insane for bossing, and the Legacy of Fury, which is somewhat redundant because Doryanis leads to the enemies always being minus 200, and we can't stack this any further. So, like, exposure and stuff also is pretty useless. It's more about map clearing because the mercenary needs to be pretty near to apply the penalty. So getting minus rest on exposure and stuff is still useful for mapping, but not for bosses anymore. Okay, so that's the AG. If you want another tech, if you don't have the money for Kingmaker and Garb, please check out the low budget version, or maybe check out my other forum guide where I also have another nice setup on them. On the mercenary, we're using, I can show you here, a wand with conductivity on hit, gloves with enfeeble on hit, and that means that all enemies get a curse and enfeeble on hit. I'm scaling some curse effect, so I'm scaling 10% of this, 15% of this, 20% of this, so we get a very strong enfeeble on all enemies, which is the equivalent to like, on mapping, like 20% less damage taken. Then we also combine the 25% suppress of Elevor with the suppress of Orbala's Last Stand. Nobody's using these boots, but I think they're very strong because it debilitates enemies. When the mercenaries fighting bosses with you, they pretty much will always be debilitated, which also makes them deal like 10% less damage, which can be very, very strong. And I'm getting him a generic bow to cap out his other resistances as far as I can and keep him alive. Yeah, and the rings are the classic Doryanis setup. Okay, so much for the Merc, so much for the AG, and I think you pretty much just heard about most things that I'm doing in the build. The other ones you can think about yourself. Oh yeah, I'm also using this, probably a pretty nice tech, the Blue Nightmare, and if you combine it with the tattoos, it gives you, because lightning resistance and stuff grants you spell block, so if you get yourself tattoos, every single tattoo grants you res and spell block, which is such a nice combo. And the same goes for Red Nightmare, where you can simply path through and you get, as you can see, 21 flat block. Very, very strong. Alright, I think that's it. I think that's it. If you've got any more questions, I'll keep updating the forum guide. So, thanks for joining. I'm pretty happy with the build, honestly. It was rather stressful to like think about like what do I say and stuff, because it's so many mechanics, probably the most mechanics that I did in a build yet, and it will be probably pretty hard to follow, and I don't know whether this build will be successful, but I for sure am having a lot of fun. I will probably be playing this for a while, and I'll be considering pushing the build even more. But for now, I think it's a good point to make a build. Ways for pushing this build would probably be like Onslaught, Tailwind, Elusive Boots, a Mage Blood, of course, or Headhunter. But once you get them, your resistances and strength will need to be rebalanced and stuff, so it will take a lot of finicking. Yeah, I think that's it. Thank you for giving me your time. I hope you have fun, maybe you follow the guide, and please leave feedback. It helps me a lot, it motivates me to do these, and yeah, this was my guide to my Zoomancer, Zoomancer Tanky Autobomber.